welcome to Nourishing the Mother, where inspired women talk about the journey of motherhood through the common thread of parenting, relationship, and sexuality as a path to consciousness. We ask, in what ways can we show up more fully, live more meaningfully, parent more wholly, and love more unconditionally? How can we mine the wisdom from the experiences of our lives and expand into those challenges? If you are here, you care about paving a path of conscious and intentional motherhood, connected with yourself and your gifts, and also illuminating your children in theirs, so we may raise more whole humans who can impact this world in a more humane way. And if you feel like giving a little back to this free content, please become a patron of the show and receive extra member benefits for less than a coffee a month. Or you can leave a review on iTunes and Facebook, all of which helps the podcast keep going and reach more mamas who need this type of tonic for the soul. Head on over to patreon.com/NTM podcast to find out more. We are Julie Tenner and Bridget Wood, and we are so grateful you're here.
Hello and welcome to Nourishing the Mother. I'm Bridget Wood.
And I'm Julie Tenner, and today's podcast is moving with and beyond anxiety in motherhood.
And it comes about from a bit of a culmination of different stories I've been experiencing and thinking about the last few days. Ruminating on. So we'll get to that in a minute. But first of all, we want to say a big thank you to the latest patrons who've joined us to support the podcast. So
super amazing.
This podcast, is really, it's such a labour of love for us, and it's been going now for more than 5 years, nearly 5 years. I've lost count, a long time. And so it's really beautiful that so many of our listeners have signed on to help us keep it on the air, which is really great. So a big thank you to Tracy, Georgia, Sarah, Belinda and Chanel.
Yeah, so hopefully you are enjoying the live video recordings and all the behind the scenes stuff that Bridget and I do or don't do. And if it was excruciating for you missing part 1 and part 2, then if you're in Patreon you would get the full amount that's a pre-release.
Yeah, so that's been one thing when we've done the 2-part episodes lately. There's been, oh my God, I can't wait for part 2. We're like, just hop in and you can watch it now.
So if you really are a visual learner, then that can be a really cool place for you to be. So other part is, before we jump on there, is to remind you to jump on to nourishingthemother.com.au, scroll on down and sign up to join our community, where once every so often, as you know, we shoot you off an email, just has links to everything we've put out in the world and lets you know what we've got coming up, going on, that you can jump into should you choose to, so that you are really up to date and aware. And sometimes we also send you a little something else that's just like, hey, this is medicine for the mother heart, because it's been medicine for ours in this past week or something like that. So if you would really love to touch base with more Nourishing the Mother and gain more consciousness in your motherhood, then that is the place to do that. So nourishingthemother.com.au.
So anxiety in motherhood. Now this is a theme for me at the moment, because we're about to do I'm about to do an event for Suburban Sandcastles all about anxiety. And
so tell me about that.
So it's all about a guy essentially who essentially has it all, right? And has all encompassing kind of panic attacks and really, really gripping anxiety. And as part of that, I've got a speaker coming along who has a phenomenal story of what I find fascinating, because so much of his adult life, which is fueled by addiction, and then addiction and morphing forms. So, we have socially acceptable addictions and then socially unacceptable addictions. So he had a raging drug addiction, which was less socially acceptable, of course, which then morphed into an addiction to work, and then an addiction to long distance grueling marathon running. So I'm talking, he won the seven marathons on 7 continents in 7 days. So if you can imagine that, you're running
my God,
40 plus kilometers every day in 7 days across different continents. So like crazy, right? Crazy. And so this is like hyper masculine kind of highly competitive behavior. But he threads his story through his book, which I'm reading at the moment, all about his dad and how his dad was with him as a child. And it becomes very apparent as he then goes on to study Kundalini yoga as part of his healing, because he got a brain tumor, that he had an enormous amount of repressed emotional trauma as a child, which was part of the manifestation of his addictive personality and inability to relax or sit still. Which I wonder how much of that echoes also so many mothers in this conscious community who try to balance their desire to meet all of these needs for their children that they perceive weren't met for them, at the same time as try to contain in many ways a more dominant masculine energy which almost needs to be stimulated in order to feel okay, to be kind of always on in order to feel okay. And so I'm thinking about his story in the background, and then I'm observing myself in motherhood lately and noticing, a deeper embodiment in myself than perhaps I've noticed in my earlier years of motherhood, which I think were probably run on anxiety. And it was really useful for me because anxiety can be powerfully motivating. I think I absorbed so much of all of the different research that I'd done through all the years or through all the months and months of early parenting. And the anxiety was what gave me the energy to just keep going and learning until I knew enough, right? And so I can love it, but also notice when it becomes overwhelming in our bodies. And I had an experience of it today when my daughter, my youngest, who's eating all of the things, eating all of the food, and then also eating whatever, or putting in her mouth whatever she possibly can now that she started crawling. And it was one of those moments where I'd like run to the toilet, come back, found her with her older sisters, like, those like painting tools. Like, so you've got all those, like the foam roller and the foam sponge patty thing. And it was a whole foam kit essentially. And Pearl sitting there like bright-eyed with like a smile on her face, chewing on this foam that she'd like pulled off one of these things. And I'm thinking, fuck. So I go straight to her, fish it out of her mouth, but realise there's one bit that I couldn't quite get that was further down her mouth. And so I'm looking at the thing thinking, okay, there's not much she's taken off, but I still mental noted that she'd likely ingested this and I didn't know where it was going to go. And hopefully, like all things that get ingested, it goes straight through to her stomach and it comes out in the poo and no one's worrying. However, that wasn't quite how it went today, And so a couple of hours later when I'm attempting to feed her lunch, she's not enjoying the food. She's not enjoying the pumpkin soup. She's just really not that keen on it. I'm thinking, so it's the taste of the pumpkin. What is it? And then it dawned on me. I'm like, this sponge might be an issue. This thing could be a problem now. And nothing of her lunch went down all that well. And then she starts dry reaching, kind of like that fit. And I'm thinking, oh God, she's trying to get it up. And that happened a number of times where she would like look really unsettled and then vomit up like liquid or water or whatever it was. But I could still see it was still stuck there. And so I'm like, okay.
How's she going through all that?
She's breathing fine. She's pretty happy. Like her temperament's good. Yeah. But she's still it's just not quite right. Yeah. I can just see that she's struggling with it a little bit.
So you've like done the assessment of she's breathing.
Yeah. And she, I could also see it was work for her because she was getting kind of more tired just from the process of trying to figure out where it was in her esophagus and trying to move it. And so I called my husband because I'm thinking I don't want to hold on to all of this myself. I need to share this and also like share
just check in,
the different ideas of potentialities. And like me, he was sort of like, I think, once it goes to her stomach, we should be good. Like, and we felt like it would be small enough.
What size are we talking? Like a pea?
Like less than, like a pea. Okay. Yeah. So like less than a 5-cent piece, about a pea size. And I was thinking, is it the kind of foam that would swell or is it going to stay the size it is, like when it's wet? Like I'm just thinking about all these things in my mind. And he was like, look, it's probably nothing but, what you could do is you could, like, I can come home and you can take her down to emergency and like do an x-ray and have a look and see what it is. And so then I'm doing that in my head going, okay, that's an option. There's also a set of risks with that choice. So what am I going to do here? Do I wait it out? And anyway, we kind of conferred, and I thought we'll wait a little bit longer and I'll give her a feed and see how she goes with a feed, like, because whether that helps to move it further down, just with both the sucking motion and the constant swallowing. And it did, but I really felt like in those moments, like, this is that knot in your chest feeling of like of making decisions in motherhood, and that every choice we make has like a consequence, right? Like the wait and see approach has a consequence. The taking action approach has a consequence, which we could jump to and think, I'll just do it because it's just the best thing to do. But that would be acting not necessarily from a grounded place either. It was because I also had to assess the risk of her being in that environment, and, you know, potentially having something put down her throat and then that cutting something, like, you know, that comes with a set of risks too. So it was just that moment of, and it reminded me straight, like, took me right back to when Sylvie was a baby and she'd had like a birthmark, and my midwife had suggested that we go. It was quite unusual, and she said, you know, I think you should take her to the Monash Children's and get it looked at. And she was only a couple months old. And so that was another moment of that, like, oh my God, like, you know, I hope it's not something terrible, you know, have I loved her enough? You know, like it pulls us straight, it pulls us out of our like to-do list, it pulls us out of our like, you know, masculine desire sometimes to just have freedom from this relentlessness of motherhood, to push us into that nurturing breath by breath moment of deep presence, you know, with our child, to try to tune in and see what they need. And so it was a really interesting reflective process to look at how these moments, which can be nothing or everything, right? Like, we never know, but how functional they are to pull us deeply present with our child, and also with ourselves, and with our intuition, and with the responses that are in our bodies, like to try to tune into what our bodies are saying at the same time. Because I could feel like that real constriction of like that knot in the chest, you know it? I'm sure everybody knows it, right? We all know it. And so as I'm back here with her in the chair, with sitting in my arms, and I could feel her fall asleep, and I could feel her regular breathing and her swallowing normally, and I'm thinking, okay, I think we're good here. I think this has moved. But it was really powerful as a process of, you know, mother's intuition, and then like balancing risk, and noticing my desire to noticing also where my stories are around like making mistakes, or like health, and wanting to be on the same page as my husband, like, you know, that these things are choices we need to make together, and then I need to be aware of where I might flick out my fear into like blame, because, you know, when it's really easy to flick fear out as in a blamey way.
Yeah, I do.
And so I was just becoming hyper aware of all of the ways in which I could do that, and then not do that in the effort to get as clear a vision around this as what I wanted. That's my long-winded story around my experience with the anxiety that was all encompassing today, and how I suppose moved through it. And I could feel myself still holding on to it in the afternoon, like she'd had a sleep on me, and Sylvie was like just doing something, and I cracked it with Sylvie in ways that I rarely have. And I thought, wow, I'm still holding a lot of this energy in my body, like it's coming out in like, you know, like I don't know, what's that word? Like, it was coming out in a triggered kind of way. Like my I was so tightly wound that I knew that the provocations around me that usually I'd just meet without issue were like really irritating. And so I was like, okay, what do I need to do right now to unwind that, to like uncoil that, because I don't need that stress response on anymore. Like, I think we're good. And so I ended up like trying to like push through dinner, because the kids were the older two had gone to swimming with Marcus, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to get in the bath with her. Like, I like ran a hot bath, like filled it full of Epsom salts, and just got in there, and it was just the most perfect way to both reconnect with her, like after, you know, our moments today, and then totally reset my system you know, and I think we can so often forget that it can be the simplest of things. You know, maybe it's a cup of tea, maybe it is pleasure or self-pleasure, or maybe it's a dance around the living room, whatever it is, but there's so many opportunities in our day to take note of where we find ourselves in our bodies and what stories we're running and where we can put the brakes on and what we can invite in to do that as a practice. Because it was super duper powerful. And then, of course, when the older two came home, they both hopped in the bath. So there was 4 of us in the bath, you know, and Pearl thought that was the best fun ever. So it ended up being a really beautiful opportunity to connect. It was really gorgeous.
So back to anxiety.
Back to anxiety, yes.
Come on, hit us up with your thoughts.
Well, anxiety as a feeling, I mean, it really is a future-focused feeling state. So we're not anxious about what's happening like right now. We're anxious about like what potential bad outcome there might be. So it's a future-focused, almost fear kind of response. And I think that we live in a culture now that is like geared towards that, right? Because there's all of these things that you should be scared about or worried about or nervous about, or, you know, this like kind of hamster in a wheel that's just trying to run. And I think particularly in modern motherhood, like am I making the right choices for my kids? Are they socialized enough? Are they not? Are they socialized too much? Do I have enough activities for them, or am I doing too much activities? And am I listening to them, or am I, you know, like all of the things, right? There's just so much. And so I think that there's so many ways in which we can pull the reins in on that, while at the same time seeing how we're using it too, because it's almost like a survival response that we can get into in our own nervous systems. And some of us are almost, we can get addicted to the feelings that the anxiety can provide. So even though it's like, it does feel like it kind of almost downregulates us, and it can feel like we're kind of a little bit buzzy, but there's something in that we get from it. There's something that we almost like a little bit of a drug, you know, that feels good. So noticing if your system is in that state of kind of waking up and go, and there's no like lull in it. And there's, I think too, like social media can feel this if you've got like a phone addiction, that's almost keeping you in that state, because you've also got all of these, you know, 1,001 more reasons to be anxious, because you're looking at all of the things that you haven't done that someone else has done, or that you're not meeting that you think you should have met. And so noticing, I think, what your habitual responses are in how you go about your day, you know, like, do you feed your own anxiety by what you bring into your environment? Are you curating your environment and what you consume in a mindful way, so that you're not overstimulating yourself and keeping yourself hooked on it? Because if we think about, you know, neuroplasticity and the fact that we're molding and shaping our brains based on what we're consuming, and if we continue along the same loop, we're kind of creating deeper and deeper and deeper grooves in that response. So we have so much freedom actually to change that if we want to, but it's about consciously curating in different ways what we're consuming and what we're having bodily responses to, and how we can repattern that.
I think that's key though, isn't it? You have to want to. You have
to want to, right? Because if you're getting hits from it, then you're not going to want to.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, right? Because it can be excruciatingly uncomfortable to change it. Well, yes, but to be an anxiety to start off with. So it's this lovely, socially acceptable label now that it really alleviates a whole lot of responsibility. That's the thing with labels.
Yeah. And I was thinking,
I'm not responsible because it's the thing.
Because I've got this thing. Yeah. Yeah. And we're so quick as a culture to pathologize these things and say, oh, it's your neurochemistry and it's this. But your neurochemistry is in response to the life and beliefs that you're living, and can also be changed.
And the tracks you keep running.
And can also therefore be changed when you change your lifestyle and all of the...
And lay down new tracks. And continue to groove those ones rather than the other ones.
Rather than the ones that you're already stuck in. But I think it depends on, I mean, I think for a lot of our listeners, it wouldn't be unusual to be totally of the same belief. However, there is still a very dominant mainstream view that it's outside of you and that you've now got to hand yourself over to be fixed, right? And that I think, the stats are enormous. The anxiety disorders, or as it's named a disorder because that's the label that's given it. But in fact, I think you'll find an enormous amount of order in your anxiety because of all the things that it gives you in your life and how you use it. And I think that Julie and I both invite you to ask yourself how you're using it to your own benefit, even if it can feel really uncomfortable. Because it doesn't feel good in our bodies necessarily, but it can become really addictive as a state of being.
Yeah, it can be. And that buzz you were talking about before, I was like, yeah, God, so many times I can place myself in exactly that buzz that you're talking about. And so many times do I witness it in the women around me. But I do think of it a lot like OCD and a lot like hoarding type of behaviours, that it's so fabulous to distract you from the thing you can't be with in stillness within yourself, or alternatively, the things you can't feel. Like I was hearing the man in your story from the book that you're reading. I was thinking, he has no emotional bandwidth on how to be with emotion.
That's right.
That's why he chose Kundalini, right?
Yeah.
And I think we have these fantastic behaviors at moving away from feeling. Like we can yoga over pain, right?
Yeah. It was just another
And we can
way.
busy over pain. And we can anxiety buzz over pain.
There's 1,000,001 ways to numb it out.
Yeah, because if there's like this looming fear of, being attacked, which sets off that system in your body, but being attacked by, who knows, the judgments and projections
of others
that you've decided are already going to happen, or the way your child's going to turn out, or the way that you're going to respond and then he's going to respond and then like it's... How fantastic, how clever of you, how incredibly intelligent are you to have creatively adapted exactly the panacea that you need. But all drugs come with a side effect.
That's right.
It's just one of them.
Yeah. Whether it's a drug that you're ingesting or a drug that you're creating through your own body, through your own perceptions. Totally.
So I kind of, and, as you know, we've got anxiety that runs through our bloodline as well. And I can see it play out in all sorts of different ways. And I actually really enjoy watching it, getting curious about it, because if you are inviting curiosity, of course, you can't be in judgment at the same time.
It's true. Yeah.
And particularly with my daughters, I'm always watching that flow, and particularly with my eldest daughter, I see and have over many years talked about the anxiety that I see sort of come in waves with her. And yet I watch her now in high school, and I think it's one of her most functional traits.
In what way? How does she use it?
Organisation.
Ah, yes. It helps her be very prepared.
Very prepared. And like ready for anything. She's like the ultimate Girl Scout without ever having been a Girl Scout.
Yeah.
Like she already planned, she's got planned out her entire homework, planned out her schedule, planned out when she's doing things, planned out how she's saving money and what she needs them for and how that, like everything, right? It's just like organisation across the board. I didn't like parent her into that.
Yeah. It's become a really...
It's adaptive process.
Great go-to trait that she's got. Yeah.
So, of course, like any of our traits, there's a dark side to it. But that's what I watch as a parent. And when we start to hit those edges of the dark side of what has benefits, then my job is, let's go into here.
So an example of that might be for her, she's closed off to things that are outside that schedule that she's already pre-mapped out, for example.
Yeah, or just closed off to other ways of the world being or of her being. Another example that would be she was sick a couple of weeks ago and had a day off school and then came back the next day and she'd missed homework or something from the day before and it hit a panic attack for her. But I could tell because this is why I pick my kids up and drop them off at school, because as I've said to you before, that 5 to 10 minutes in the car is fucking invaluable.
Yeah.
And so I watch her and she walks to my car and I'm thinking, She's uber sprightly.
Too exuberant.
Yeah. Yeah. And as I've said to you, her anxiety, often she's worked out how to I would say move with it or adapt with deep pain or fear by being very dramatic, putting on her drama self.
Yeah.
And I'm watching her, and so then she sits in the front, she's next to me, and she's like, well, you wouldn't believe what happened today. And off she goes, and it's this like elaborate tale, and she's a fabulous storyteller, you know. And I'm listening to this whole time, smiling, and I'm giving her all the right cues, and I'm enjoying the story. I haven't left from the curbside yet.
Yeah.
And I'm listening to the whole lot, letting those energy waves ride, and I'm sitting there going, hello, anxiety.
Yeah.
You know? So I just really make sure that I ride her wave so that we can ride the story, because I think when she's really, when our children are in their feminine, no different to when we're in ours, we need a certain amount of responsiveness to be able to stay in that.
Yeah.
So right cues. But at the same time, I think the gift of parenting the way that you and I do is that we've learned how to cultivate what we term regulation, but ultimately what I'm really sinking into it is that it's an ability to hold a masculine polarity and be able to ride with and meet the feminine within the child. So I'm watching this, moving with the flow, feeling her energy, and at the same time I'm going, pull your energy down because you're going to need it in a minute. You know, so I'm getting, there's a part of me that's
you're
just
getting like so solid.
Super present in my body.
You're feeling the core of the earth right now.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I don't have to say anything when my body does that. And so I just maneuver myself in my seat just enough so that I'm almost, you know, like perfect face-to-face, heart-to-heart eye contact with her, leaning around, you know. And I just look at her and hold her eye contact in stillness. And, of course, that's enough. And she looks at me, and you can almost see the second she realises energetically, because it's like a deer in the headlights when she realises the energy has been tapped right into. And she's like, and you can see in her head she's got this moment where she's like, run. And then there's this other part of me that like really wants to let go.
Yeah.
And I think we all have those moments when we're right there and we're in the presence of a masculine energy that can hold that.
And it's almost like, shit, she's seen me.
Yeah.
Like, I've been seen.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so the choice at that exact nuanced split second is...
We're just interrupting this week's podcast to tell you about our upcoming course in Suburban motherhood, which is called Soulful Parenting. So this is much awaited. It was asked for in our tribe, and so it's all about the spiritual teachings of parenthood. Love courageously, live honestly, and without seeking perfection. And there are 4 modules: holding on, letting go, fullness, be love, and the vow. Get onto it with us, nourishingthemother.com.au.
Do I have what it takes to take her where she needs to go? And my answer was yes. And I will take you there. And so I went, what's going on? And she's like, ooh, you know, and out come all of these tears and the rant and the like, I can't ever have time off. I'm never going to be able to because I can't, you know, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, here we are. So this is beautiful, right? One, we've cracked it. We've got to the core. I can hear all of her internal anxiety dialogue, and this is anxiety that's now gone too far one way.
Yeah.
So right now she needs to feel all of the feelings and learn what that gentleman in that book did not, how to be with, rather than try and anxiety over and just more control so that then my world feels better.
Yeah, right? Yeah.
We don't need to upskill what is already a skill. So let's just work out how to be with what is not yet a skill, you know? And so that's what I mean when I see that is I can see her anxiety and I don't want to eliminate it from her body because I can see all of the ways
that it's masterful for her.
Masterful. And she is by far, like, in so many ways, leaps and bounds in front of her peers by virtue of having anxiety and a skill set that allows her to continuously plan, organize, categorize, time manage.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Amazing.
Yeah.
But what we want to do as parents is be the pulse, that we can read the pulse in them and go, it's vital, it's good, it's part of who they are, it's their pulse. May not be mine, but I can read it. It's her. It's good. It works for her. She feels vital. Versus, no, we're not vital right now. So what do we need here? So, long story short, that's what I see in it is I'm always curious about anxiety because I do see it as having so many benefits and I mean that in the most loving way, not like, oh, you weak person for having, loving your benefits more than changing. Not like that. When I'm saying it has so many benefits, I'm saying it from a place of deep compassion because the fact that you have developed this trait comes from hurt. So when I see a trait that we might say is out of the normal spectrum of the way that we say, I don't know, some sort of robotic human is supposed to exist.
I was thinking whatever you think normal is.
Right, yeah, exactly. Yeah. Is just where has that come from? Why did you need it? And why do you still need it? Why is the form of it still existing? So there are women in my family who can't leave their houses.
Wow.
Who can't drive, who, lots of different manifestations of essentially the same hurt. But it totally works for them in so many ways that are in and of themselves self-love. They don't have to do something that they're not equipped for. They don't have to go and meet the hurt again. They don't have to be around people who they've learnt to mistrust or who will wound them. Yeah. They don't, the world can come to them on their terms rather than them having to enter the world on its terms or on anybody else's terms because anxiety allows you, I can't because I am. So the world has to change for me because I have needs and they're validated by a medical term.
That's right. Yeah.
Or in my psyche, either, whatever. So I guess I just look at it all and I think if you don't want to change it, I'm not here to tell you that you have to. I'm not here to say your way of being is wrong and your way of being is right. But I look at it all with deep compassion for how it came to be and with deep curiosity for how that manifests and what you get out of it. I find that enormously fascinating.
Me too. But I also think that when you can give permission or appreciation for how it's there and how it's come to be and how you're using it, then it can loosen the stranglehold that it has on you because you're no longer having to identify with it so strongly. You can start to see, oh, this is not necessarily me. It's a part of me that I've adapted to and I've used it in X, Y, Z ways. But now because I can see what it's given me, I can now allow it to more form if I'm willing to, as opposed to it owning me, which I think very often women can feel like they're owned by it, right? Like that it can feel so
you're at the mercy
of it that it's you can't even bring that down because it feels so big. Yeah. So that's a beautiful example of how you
I just think it's like contractions, right? It's not bigger than you because it is you.
I love that. That's one of my most favourite quotes.
I come back to it all of the time.
Yeah.
Whatever you're feeling is not bigger than you because it is you. It's like so good. All of it is you.
It's so good.
Whoever you is.
Yeah,
right.
In this moment.
Well, and whoever you is, right? Because there's the you and then there's the you behind the you and the you behind the you behind the you. Like, I mean,
all of the
what sort of spiritual trip do you want to go on?
I have a vision of like the distorted, like the distortions that come through. What's that thing, that's the refraction that shows the refracted light? Like, and the light looks different.
Like a kaleidoscope? No,
not the kaleidoscope, the other thing, like a prism maybe?
Oh, yeah.
Whatever it is, but just throws off all of the different reflections, right? Because the you is so multifaceted.
Yeah, it is. So I guess just to wrap this up, what would you want to wrap it up with? I mean, I don't know if we've really spoken about moving with anxiety, and I think we've spoken probably more about moving beyond
it.
Yeah.
So I think that this is probably where I'd ask you more in terms of an embodiment piece, because obviously if it's in your family, there will have been aspects of this that have come up for you.
Yeah, definitely. That's what I was saying. You can totally touch into
and
this.
that you must work with from a body practice point of view. So what would you say that you tend to do to work with it as it comes up?
So I really have to kind of sit with that and think about that. When it comes up in motherhood and I'm feeling super anxious, I think it's probably the cultivation of the masculine polarity, where as opposed to getting busy with the everythingness, I get very busy with the nothingness. So I always think we have a choice, right? We can always choose where our focus goes. We say we can't, and that's lovely. But it's not true.
I love that. It's lovely, but it's not true.
It's not true. And I say it's lovely because I have compassion for when we choose it. Me too.
It reminds me, actually saying that, of that, because I had these visions of like, there's always so much to do, right?
Yeah.
Like you're always just kind of chasing your tail, and then you're like, and we both like bring down visions of my grandmother who had 12 kids, right?
Right.
And you're like, what's my 3? What's my 4? You know, like
it's all relative.
It is, right? And there will always be more to do, always and forever.
Right. Yeah, and it doesn't matter what you pick. It wouldn't matter what your path was. That is always the truth. You could be a Tibetan Buddhist living in isolation in a cave, and there would still be more conscious work for you to do. Like,
you're never done.
Ever.
Yeah.
No matter what you choose or don't choose.
That's right.
So choose what you love and what you feel devotional love for. I feel devotional love and purpose for my family. So for the evolution of my children and the conscious evolution that offers me as a spiritual practice. Because, you know, we could all espout amazing spiritual works, couldn't we, from a cave where we don't actually have to interact with any human.
Have to meet anybody or talk to anyone.
It is completely different to actually have to do that in this realm.
Yeah, totally.
I do think that's masterful Jedi work. Really.
It is, especially when, particularly with your own children, they're actually genetically programmed to push all of your buttons, like, to help you heal. Like you've actually got like the perfect guru for you at your feet. Right. Couldn't get a better design if you're wanting to grow.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, that's so true.
Exactly. So I think we've got off track, but bringing it back, what do we do in anxiety, particularly when I come from a strong line of anxiety and nervous system disorders in general, mental health disorders? I don't do drugs. I never did drugs.
Was that a conscious choice?
Yeah, it was.
Right.
Yeah, even as a teenager. And I sometimes wonder if that's because I had such a rich emotional life that there was nothing for me to escape because I already knew how to be with everything. You know?
Yeah, yeah.
Thanks, Mum.
You'd already figured out
for all of those of you with a mother wound like me.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mum.
You've already seen it all and had to upskill to be with it all.
Yeah. So by the time I get to teenagehood, really the emotional landscape is easier than what I've come from.
That's powerful.
Yeah. So that combined with I was made there was nothing that was hidden. There was nothing that was hidden from me by my mother about anything. So I had access to seeing a lot of mental health and all sorts of stuff when I was a kid in family, and, you know, I was my mum's equal in many ways, right? I was the parentified child.
Yeah, yeah.
So I was very well aware of the mental health disorders and schizophrenia, and I was completely aware of, you know, the neighbour down the street who smoked one too many bongs and now was schizophrenic. And I'd actually already done my own research on, wow, that's like a thing where your brain can like flip a switch. And all of a sudden I remember having this thought process of being like, holy shit. So in my head, I have this set of wires, and to some extent, depending on what I choose to do in my body or not do in my body, those switches will be turned on and off, and I don't have mental control over that.
It's fucking like a great gift, really.
So I was like, if I can't have mental control over it, no fucking way am I doing it.
Yeah.
Right, says me, because I need control because of where I've come from.
Yeah.
So the thought of having my mental wiring be
compromised.
Because that was all I had, because that had kept me safe. It was my best friend.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the thought of that being out of my control, of not being my best friend, of being my parent, really, that's what my mental space was. Couldn't do it. So I never did drugs, ever. I smoked dope with my husband for the first time, like seriously, 8 years ago. Because I'd never done it. And I was like, you know what? I'm like beyond being scared now of what else is out there and where my brain could go. Because I'm now way practiced at the other side of that. But I also think that was always my journey, is I had to work out how to do the other side on my own, not give me the drug so that I can be reliant on the thing that takes me somewhere.
Yeah, yeah, as opposed to learning how to take yourself there.
Right.
Yeah.
So anyway, so I did that with my husband like seriously 8 years ago or something, and it was great. I loved it. It was fantastic. And part of me was like, why the fuck didn't I do this earlier?
Yeah.
And the other part of me was like, because I just didn't need it. No, I didn't need it. And plus, you know, layer on top of that, pick your drug. Mine was sex. So, okay, I didn't do your street drugs.
Yeah.
Did a lot of the other.
Yeah.
So, but again, all totally on my path.
Yeah.
Anyway, I don't know how I got onto that. What was I getting onto that? Don't do drugs, right? Don't do drugs, kids. Who am I?
Yeah.
So what I think my point of that is, if you know that you have a genetic predisposition or have had previous wirings that make you more susceptible to addiction or alcoholism, you just don't.
Yeah, that was it, because my family it's alcoholism. And I know my mum was always on edge, like that we could go that way, because that was my dad, and that was, you know, all of his family, and you know, like really deeply entrenched. And it feels really good that we seem to have stopped it, our generation, which is really powerful. But it's really powerful. But it comes with that. I had that really strong sense that we need to be aware here. You know, and you know, and then I think you because of that, you geniusly then seek out the stories that scare you into not doing the thing.
Don't you?
You know, you become aware of the person who falls over and has a brain injury because they drank too much, or the girl who overdoses on ecstasy pills when she's 15. You know, like, and you pull those into your awareness, particularly I think when you're a teenager and you're so generally impressionable, you hold in your awareness the things that are going to be like the roadblocks that are stronger than the social pressure or the peer pressure to do the thing.
Totes.
So genius.
It is. But I do think there is a level of 101 is, if that sits in there with you, you just don't do it because you don't have the setup to be stable enough to do the bit that it can be a beautiful experience. You can absolutely use drugs and alcohol to take you spiritually different places. They're used in cultures across our time and across our planet, in ceremonial places to reach other sides and, you know, blah, blah, blah. But they are well set up, well prepared, structured, purposeful, intentional and conscious. If they are not the setup, why are you doing it?
And it's also really unsafe. Like when you're choosing it outside the realm of that.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm just saying that from the perspective of, please be aware of, you know, giving yourself the best possible outcome I think. So that would be step number one for me. And if I know I'm having anxiety or have had a really tough day, I'm really conscious because I feel like I have these like gremlins in my body that are like, just have some wine, have a drink, it's like you could feel so good and this wouldn't be here if you just like took in the thing. I said this to one of my friends the other day and she was like, I think it's just because you have an intense personality and it's like you do or you don't. So you would like drink or not drink. And I was like, I don't know, but I'll sit with it. So that for me is when I know the tension is building, it's not how do I escape it? It's how do I up-level my mastery
of this in my body.
Yeah.
Again, that piece of it can't be bigger than you because it is you.
Yeah. And it's here for a reason. It's here for me to learn. This is the practice. This is where I was coming from. I've just brought myself round. So we always have a choice of what we're going to focus on, right? So I can feel the rising of anxiety, which actually, honestly, is going to be stacked on all of the previous hurts or times or traumas that exact emotion has come up in my body and I haven't been able to roll with it, finish the cycle, blah, 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 carrying all of that stacked stuff. And here it is. So in my body, I'm going, right, okay, so this is here. I could choose to focus all of my intention and energy on this feeling. So it's my dog, sorry about that, he's decided to enter the room. You better be quiet. Or I could choose to focus on the practice. So in that moment, I'm asking myself, what am I going to choose to focus on here? Which is essentially what you did today. You could see the thing, but you focused on your practice.
Rather than the thing completely consume me.
Because the more you focus on the feeling and the sensation, the more energy, because energy follows thought, energy follows consciousness. And the more you focus on it, the more you feel, the more you focus on it, the more you feel. Guess what, ladies? You are beings of amplification. You don't know how to amplify sensuality or pleasure in your body. Bet you're doing it in other ways.
Yeah. It's just not conscious.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that for me is the practice. This is, I practice my art every single day like a good musician because I don't know when I'm going to be required to play in the orchestra.
I love that.
Like that's the point though, isn't it?
You don't know when it's going to be asked.
Well, an amazing musician doesn't just go, put it away for 10 years and then I'll be the Rolling Stones on stage. That's not how it works, turns out. If you've had 10 years of break, then you're going to want to practice your heart out till you know you're good enough to play and rock the stage and the audience.
At any time that's called for.
Right. So I don't see the skill set as any different to that. So I consciously practice every day. I practice in my breath. I practice in my body. I practice in my mind. I practice in my energy focus. Parenting lets you do all of that, and so does relationship. So
true.
I practice every day so that by the time the moment arrives, I'm not like cold calling. I'm pretty warmed up.
So good. I'm fucking loving your metaphors.
I'm, I'm in the ring having already warmed up my muscles. So that already stands me in a better position. And I'm not turning up to box the fight of my life drunk or inebriated or numbed or dulled. It's not going to help me.
No.
So I make sure I'm practiced, I'm warmed up from my whole day, and I am, numbed out free. And then I get to choose. I'm in the ring. Okay. Right. So am I going to focus on getting beat up, or am I going to show up?
I can see so beautifully how all of this comes back to your childhood.
Can you? I would love for you to dispel that wisdom on me.
Well, because the terror and fear and immobilizing, like, am I even going to live right now in this moment of being a child, meant that you're never, ever, ever going to ever want yourself to be put back in that situation again. So every moment of every day is cultivating a practice to be able to continually meet what you couldn't meet as a child, and to upskill your own children to be able to meet that in the world in a way that you couldn't.
Boom. That's why you coach with us.
Did you not see that? You must know.
Not so clearly, no. I mean, I think you always get glimpses of your own stuff, but no one can, I couldn't articulate that like that. No way. You can't see your own stuff. Like, you just have to let that go.
I know you can't. You really can't. Like, I often coach and I'm often going, fuck, like, someone did that for me. Like,
right, because you can't actually do, you're not supposed to do it for yourself.
You're not.
So I'm happy just to let that go and be like, no, please tell me.
Yeah.
Because I'm fully aware I can't see myself. I'm fully aware. I don't ever see myself. Even when I'm looking in the mirror, it's still a reflection. It's not really me. I don't see myself the way other people see myself. Like, you're not supposed to.
I know,
though,
you're not supposed to.
So my point is, that is my metaphor for how I work with anxiety, is because I'm practicing. I am strumming that chord all day so that when it's time to rock out, I'm totally finger nimble. So, and that's how it is. Do I want to choose to get beat up, or do I want to choose to bring my practice? Wow.
It's beautiful.
I love bringing my practice. That's what I've worked so hard for. So I might as well reap the rewards and feel the, this, mastery, self-empowerment, self-belief, joy, strength. Like, that comes from not getting beat up in the ring. Right?
Beautiful. Poetic.
Oh, thanks. So that's what it is. I think the practice is, where am I putting my focus right now? And sometimes that's as far as you will get in your practice.
I mean, and you know, that even cultivating awareness is a big step beyond complete unconsciousness, which is where a lot of people can live in. You know, awareness is the first step, and then it's what you choose to do with that. What you choose to make your practice.
Exactly. And I think there's 1,000 ways to enter practice. I don't think that there's one way to do anything. But I think you find what works for you, and you make sure that you are practicing and you're warming up every day. Like, that's it. Like, that's actually life.
Yeah.
We all have a practice. We all have a ring. You just get to pick what you do with it. It's free will. Right?
Yeah. I love it. It feels like a good time to finish this podcast, actually. I think we've left our listeners with lots to ponder and reflect on in their own worlds. Yeah.
So to connect with you, Bridget.
Suburban.sandcastles.com. And you, Jules?
Hang on, just tell us about your movie this month.
Oh, it's called Chasing the Present. So in this, which is often what anxiety drives us towards, is try to get back to the present when we're so stuck in beyond it. So,
and where is that? When is
Melbourne,
that?
Bayside, Melbourne, on the 24th of March.
Beautiful. And if they want to jump on in and get some tickets and come watch you speak and do your thing,
Suburbansandcastles.com. And to connect with you
is thepleasurenutritionist.com. And to connect with us is nourishingthemother.com.au, Nourishing the Mother on Facebook, Instagram and Pinterest.
Remember to nourish the woman, to rock the family.
And we'll see you next week when we continue to peel back the layers on your mothering journey. And if you want to support Nourishing the Mother and all the late nights, the early mornings, the blood, sweat and tears we pour into our art, then please go to patreon.com/NTM podcast and become our patron. As a patron, you're helping all of the cost of operating this podcast, the hosting, the editing, the transcription, helping all of that be completely covered, and joining a community who are all about honouring our journeys and continuing to open. The more support we have, the longer we can last. So become a patron. We'd love to have you. Go to patreon.com/NTM podcast. We literally couldn't do this without you. Thank you so much for listening, and please share this podcast with anyone you think it would be medicine for.
This has been a production of TheWellnessCouch.com. Check us out on Facebook and join in the conversation on Facebook.com/TheWellnessCouch. Subscribe to each show on iTunes and check us out on Twitter. The Wellness Couch, streaming wellness into your lives. Whilst the Wellness Couch presenter endeavor to provide accurate and helpful information to their listeners, these podcasts cannot take into account individual circumstances and are not intended to be a substitute for health and medical advice from a qualified health professional. You should always seek the advice of a qualified health professional before acting on any of the information provided by any of the Wellness Couch podcasts.